Our friend Cheryl Twomey says, if extraterrestrials came to Earth and offered you a trip to their planet, but their government was a totalitarian one, would you go? Which would hold the superior position, your deep-seated moral and ethical ideals or your love of space and adventure? I'll answer the question as it was asked. If I was offered a trip to their planet, their totalitarian planet, of course I'd take it. Of course I'd take it. I'd take it because I'd want to see it. Now, the deeper question is, if they said, would you like to come to our planet, and then we can use you to enslave humans so that you can work in our underground sugar caves. Despite the fact that I try to say this as often as I possibly can, I'd like to remind our alien overlords, our insect overlords, that as a trusted member of the media, I can be useful in rounding up other humans to serve in their underground sugar caves. That's where I would draw the line. In other words, would I put myself into a totalitarian system to see it? Absolutely. Even if it meant, maybe I'll end up in a cage. I don't know. It'd be worth the trip. But would I do it at the expense of my country or my fellow humans or my fellow man? No, I wouldn't. I would stay home. There's no excuse for slavery, and there's no excuse for totalitarianism. There's no excuse for coercion and all of this stuff. I've done nothing but read about the Nazis and the communists for the last year and a half. Every time I go through it, I get a little deeper. In the last pass, learned everything I could about Hitler, learned everything I could about Stalin, learned everything I could about Stalin's executioners. Now I'm dealing with Hitler's henchmen. Read 3 biographies of Himmler. I'm reading read 1. I'm finishing a second biography of Goebbels. And I need to understand this stuff. And the more of it I understand, the more I realize that this is awful, and it's only awful because of compliance and because of people turning a blind eye. And I've got enough history to answer that question. If somebody said, you want to go see this Nazi planet? Yes. Do you want to go see this Nazi planet and be used as a tool of the Nazis to either enslave your people or just to help them continue to enslave their people? No, I'll pass. 2 to go. Cindy Lucin, our friend also, who's been very kind. Some of you have been so kind to me during this latest period, and Cindy and Cheryl, 2 of those people. What do you suppose the universe looks like if you were able to perceive it from the perspective that includes another dimension? Also, do you and I exist in a dimension that we're only dimly aware of? I suspect that we are multidimensional creatures which we are able to perceive in 3 dimensions, but I don't know that for a fact. The best way to get to that is to look at something called a hypercube, tesseract. Now, you can see a picture of a tesseract online. And I had this funny, because I had this thought about a couple nights ago when I was sitting there just sleeping or waking up from sleeping. One of the things about a tesseract is a representation. It's called a hypercube because it's a cube that looks like a cube within a cube, and it's drawn in such a way as to give you an illusion that all 4 axes are perpendicular to each other, not just 3. So you have the 3 axes, X, Y, and Z, that are perpendicular 90 degrees to each other, and then there's a 4th axis that also looks like it's 90 degrees to the other 3. It obviously can't be 90 degrees to the other 3, and even though you can look at it, you can't see the 4th dimension, and we never can. A one-eyed jack in Flatland cannot see the 3rd dimension. All he can see is what's inside the card, nothing above or below the card. But this thing sets up enough of a shadow on the wall of the cave that it gives you just a visceral kind of a feeling. And so what's interesting about this thought I had was that if you look at a tesseract on a computer screen, here's a picture of a tesseract, it's not helping, because a drawing of a cube, of an actual cube, is a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional object. The way to see a tesseract is with a 3-dimensional model, and I've seen 3-dimensional models of tesseracts where you can see them in 3 dimensions. You hold it. Then you actually have a 3-dimensional model of a 4th-dimensional object. If you have a picture of a tesseract on a computer screen, your computer screen is flat. You have a 4-dimensional object on a 2-dimensional screen. So ideally, you should see a tesseract in your hands, should hold it in your hands as a physical model. But if you look at it, you can imagine a world where there's X, Y, and Z, and then out. That's the only way I can describe it. There's X, there's Y, and there's Z, and then there's out of all 3 of those, and you can look down on them. But one of the things about being in a 4th-dimensional creature looking at me can see inside me and outside me and all of me at the same time. He not only has a full 360-degree view of me vertically and horizontally, he can see the back of me and the front of me at the same time. He can also see inside me. How do you make sense out of that? Well, if you look at a bacteria, a 2-dimensional creature, as good as virtually 2 dimensionals, A bacteria looks at another bacteria. It can't see what's behind the bacteria, but from the third dimension, we can see here's a bacteria, and there's a bacteria, and blocked by the view of bacteria number 2, there's bacteria number 3 behind him. We can see above the bacteria that the other bacteria can't see past. So a three-dimensional creature can see through walls, can see through me, can see through matter, see all kinds of things. So it's kind of groovy and kind of cool. By the way, if you go to YouTube, you can see animations. Look for Tesseract animation or multidimensional animations, and you'll see things like cubes and stuff that are turning in on themselves. And obviously, it's not the real fourth or fifth dimension, but it gives you a sense. It gives you a like, whoa! It gives you a kind of a, man, that's a little creepy and kind of cool. Can't recommend it highly enough. It's very hypnotic and very cool.